It's too loud. Today we're going to replace a Truvativ Crankset on a road bike. All right, turns out something I overlooked. Customer brought this in. This FSA is actually part number BB86/30 compatible. So 30 BB30, most likely the spindle's BB30. That spindle on there is probably closer to a 24 if you measure it. So totally incompatible. This is going to be for your newer bike, or you'd have to replace your bottom bracket completely to accommodate a BB30. What I will do is go ahead and just remove this, take it out, get it back in. All right, going to start with removing crankset over here. The derailleur's in the relaxed position, meaning it's on the smallest gear. Whoops. Yeah. And then you could remove the chain, have it sit on the frame, or as you're pulling the crank off, you can remove the chain. It's not a big deal. It's not going to be much tension, but we're using an 8mm over here. And this is my go-to method. Hand over the top tube, armpit on the top tube, and then tool's going to be more or less horizontal towards me. Opposite crank arm. This right one's going to be, left one's going to be horizontal. And then we're going lefty-loosey, so in the down motion. So there we go. So this is self-extracting, so it's going to feel loose for a turn or two. Ooh, actually, what do we have going on here? Okay. All right, thought it was a self-extracting system, but no, this system is very old, so it has a bolt. It's almost like a square tapered spindle system. Got a big bolt here, big bolt on the other side, and then we're going to get a crank arm puller. It's going to fit right inside there. Most likely it's going to be the one with the black handle, Park tool. So this is our black Park tool. It's a CCP-44. The round edge here is about the size of this diameter. There's a blue handle, and that one has a narrower center. That's going to be more for square tapered stuff, but this is a lot wider. Going to hit that center. So you want to thread this up. We don't want the round tip exposed really. We want to catch the outer threads, the ones that I'm moving right now. We don't want the center to bump into the center in there before our threads fully engage, so this outer. And then just take your time here. These threads are very fine. The metal on this tool is a really hardened steel, and then we're going into a softer aluminum, so the threads on the crank are going to be soft. You will mess those threads up if you don't take your time. And I want full engagement here. I'm going well with fingers. If you have trouble, just wipe down your threads inside and wipe down the tool. Maybe a little dab of chain oil. But this is finger tight. I got the majority. I got probably 3/4 or more of the threads of the tool inside the crank arm. That means you have a very good bite. Less chance of this tool wanting to slip out of this tool, because we're going to start turning this one. And that's going to go and hit the center of the spindle, or the shaft. Actually, this guy's already coming off. Yeah, so I'm always ready for a fight, but that cooperated pretty nicely. And there's our spline, or they probably have a very special name for their spline system. And just remove this, take it out, get it back in. Check out the bearings. So I just removed the chain, relax tension here, pull this guy out. If it's stuck, hit it with the rubber mallet on the opposite side. So yeah, this is going to measure something like that. So when you pull these off, you may have a dust cover. It either stays here stuck, or you can remove it with your finger. This one's not here. This one actually came off with the spindle. So this area, this ring right here, this yellowish color, that's our metal dust cover that came off with the spindle, but that will just cover your bearing, the bottom bracket. So it's just basically a dust cover. I would just leave that on if you don't have to take it off. It's a little stuck and I don't want to bend this whole ring. There is metal with the rubber coating. This measures, yeah, about 24 mil right there. Let's go down to the base, probably the same down here. Yeah, about 23, yep, hit 24. This side over here, this is our left side, non-drive side. There's a step down right there. I'm going to do the step down just before the spline. That drops down to 22. So keep that in mind too, because the other side, the bottom bracket, left side, maybe a narrower. Keep that in mind. So this is our drive side bottom bracket. Dust covers off, but this is bare bearing cartridge just into this outer cup here. One unit. We're not really taking this out. You're just replacing this whole cartridge. You're unscrewing it out of the frame. If you had to unscrew it, or loosen it, whatever the term is, you're going to go in the tightening motion because the threads are reversed from what we're used to. So tightening motion to loosen, and it will come out. And then you can put your finger in here. Anytime you get your fingers on the bearing, you're going to get the best feel. This is really smooth, super buttery, melted butter, moving nicely. No side-to-side play. Good time to check your bottom bracket. Make sure it's tight to the frame. Anytime you're working with bottom brackets, we're pretty safe. If we don't know the number offhand, we can't find it. Anywhere from 40 to 52 is very vague, but 45, 48, most of the time you're in a good spot. I'm going to check the other side, and that bearing feels really good too. So check that with the torque wrench, both sides, make sure you feel good there. If this is loose, you could create some creaking. If the threads are dry, you can get creaking. All right, so this is sharing. This is a pretty popular bottom bracket cup tool. Park tool, BBT 69.2. It fits nicely, it's pretty tight. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm not gonna use a torque wrench, I'm just gonna feel it by hand, because over time you may develop a good feel. So I'm gonna go for tightening, I'm going counterclockwise, that's going in the tightening motion. For the drive side, 99.9% of bikes are gonna be like this. These drive side threads are kind of a reversed, oh yeah, definitely loose. I was barely putting pressure. Listen to my voice as I put more pressure. Okay, now it's getting tough. There we go. And I'm going to do the other side. So this is the left side if you're sitting on the bike. Non-drive side, because there's no drivetrain, there's no chain. I'm just going to go in the regular tightening motion, clockwise. Yeah, those are loose. I definitely need a nice snug up. So that's about 45-ish. I'm going to go ahead and remove this yellowish ring right here. That is the dust cover for the bearing. I'm going to be very careful here. So I'm using the length of the screwdriver just underneath. Just a gentle pry on one side, pry on the other, and then if you get two pries, finger and a very gentle bam. So the yellowish is the metal, and then if I flip it over, then it goes to a black, which is probably just a real thin rubber coating or plastic coating. That'll be the outside. You'll be looking at this when I go put this on the bearing. It even says GX whatever. That's facing you. Logos are always facing out, facing you. And then there's nothing left here. There's no more bearings. There's no wavy washer, anything like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and slip it back on. This way I don't forget, because I'm talking and playing with the camera. There. So that's gonna go on right exactly where it needs to go, touching the bearing. So this is the left side, non-drive side. It looks like there's a cover here on. Let's see, it's not quite coming off right there. It may or may not come off. It could just be part of the unit all kind of bonded on to this left side cup. There's no reason for you to try to remove this. Oh, there it goes. This thing's filth. Oh, actually, is it coming? Yeah, that's just the dust cover. And then you got to the bearing. We're just moving, still pretty good. A little bit, definitely dirty. Got whatever grease was there turned kind of grayish. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick that back. So the reason it has some metal in it too, because the crank arm most likely is going to rub against it, and it needs to hit some metal, something solid, good foundation, because then it's going to apply pressure to the bearing, and we want to hit the bearing in the right spot, which is metal. You know, probably the inner sleeve. We do not want to hit the middle of the bearing cartridge where we could potentially hit the ball bearings, and then you have some binding or grinding right there. And you could wipe this area down. You know, you can use a rag. You definitely don't want to put any degreaser in this area, spray it. You don't want the degreaser to get past the seals, which can happen, and then get into the bearings, and you'll start to break down the grease in the bearings. All right, so back to the install. This particular system, I'd say that the Truvativ is very similar to the FSA. This is a GXP, Giga X pipe. So that's what they're calling the spindle. Like the splines you see here, that's what they're calling the Giga. We'll call it a Giga pipe. So there's no other washers here. If you need washers, it's because you're trying to figure out the distance, you know, from the crank arm not hitting too close to the frame, or crank arm or chain rings. We don't want them to hit the chainstay or chain rings are getting too close to the frame and not allowing the derailleur to function and grab those gears. You know, if the chain ring's too far out, maybe you got too many spacers here, so then that we can't shift from small to big, or vice versa. That can happen. So we're going to slide this in here. You would wipe this all down, throw a little grease where you would imagine see the bearings. So thin coat of grease here, thin coat of grease over where the other side of the bearings are, maybe a little bit on the spindle, the splines here, or the gigapipe, and then you have threads inside here where your left side crank arm is going to bolt into. But just wiggle jiggle. Some of these can be tight, and then just make sure you don't jam your chain in there somewhere. Make sure the chain's out of the way. And that's it all the way. You can always do a little test spin. That feels great, super loose melted butter. And then we'll install on the other side. So here's another reason to pay close attention. Again, if you don't have directions, you don't know what's what, how to apply spacers. We talked about spacers on the other side. Now we're on the left side, non-drive side. We have a certain amount of gigapipe or spindles sticking out. We need enough for this crank arm to grab onto and have good integrity. So say there's an inch sticking out, and then this is an inch in width. You know, I want at least half would be very minimum. If we can get 3/4, grab 75% of contact, that would be great. When a spacer would come into play, if we have a spacer here, this would move the whole bottom bracket outward towards me, so then we'd lose some of this spindle. And just for example, I'm going to push this through a little bit. This thing is just filthy. Whoa, too much. So like right there, we barely have any spindle sticking out. Say we had a couple spacers here, I would remove those spacers, put this back on, and then it would show more spindle showing. Now my chain is in the way. Come on, there we go. Now we have enough spindle. So if there's too much spindle, that means say there's no spacers here, we tighten up our bottom bracket, and then there's too much spindle protruding out. When I go to put this on, if there's 1.5 inches sticking out and there's only 1 inch to grab here on this crank arm, I put this on 100% and I have a huge gap, then the whole crank set is going to shift forwards and backwards or side to side. So that's when you would add your spacer. So there is a method to figure these things out if you don't have directions or proper directions, or the manufacturer just sucks. But that's how you would deal with your spacers. And just making sure you align these correctly. You know, drive side is in the down 6 o'clock, left side is in the 12 o'clock. Or you can mess them up if you want to screw with your friends. All right, so just one bolt reattaching this guy. Put a little grease there if you need it. This one has a washer that usually stays stuck on, but it looks like it's all one unit. You may see some actual inner threads right here. Those inner threads are for that tool I just used to remove this crank arm. Sometimes that crank arm's stuck, that's why we use the crank arm puller. And that's the black handled one. Part number, I think it's a CC4. Something like that. So I'm going to tighten this by hand. There we go. And then this again, we're probably looking around somewhere between 40 and 50. I'm going to shoot for like 45. You can just go by hand if you feel good, if you feel confident. Maybe a little reckless. There's one. Make sure that tool drives in there. Jiggle and wiggle. Get that tool deep. Wow, there we go. Make sure we're still moving. If you tighten up, get it pretty tight, get it to where you need, and you go to turn this and you feel resistance, there's dragging, then something went wrong. We're putting too much pressure on the actual bearing, or the crank arm itself is rubbing on the face of the bottom bracket. So then we got to mess around with our spacers. It becomes a little bit of a back and forth, so you just got to make sure you have the correct spacers. But that spins nicely, and we'll get that chain back on. Boom, and we're back in business. A little noisy there.